Ka pūhao te ata huakirangi ka tuwheratea ngā tatau o tō tātou au tukupu. Ko te pū, ko te more, ko te wū, ko te aka, ko te rea, ko te wao, ko te kū, ko te whē, ko te kore. Te kore tā maua ki te iringa, te kore tā maua ki te oronga. Te kore te whakaarohia i te tīmatanga, te kore te whakaarohia i te otinga. He kore tau āwhia, he kore tau tatai, he kore tau ritenga. Te kore penui, te kore pero, te kore te wā i awa, te kore te toitoi awa, te kore te tūpua, te kore te oranga. Nō reira, mai te kore, ko te pō, nā te pō kāputa ko te kukune, ko te pupuke, ko te iiri, ko te maara, ko te manako, kāputa ki te whaiao, ki te ao marama. Tākina atu rā, ko te kawa nui, ko te kawaroa, ko te kawa ki te kore, ko te kawa ki te pō, ko te kawa ki te ao kiko nei. Ko te kawa ki a rangirui e tuake nei ki a papatu anupu e takoto nei. Ko te kawa ki a uru a ngā whetū i te rangirā, a pūanga a matariki a reua. Ko te kawa ki a tāwiri mātea a te hau nui, hau roa, hau orai. Ko te kawa ki a tangaro, te waipuna, wai ora, wai Māori e, ko te kawa ki a tūmatauenga a te hau maru ki ngā tangata katoa. Ko te kawa ki a rongo marairoa a te au maru i runga i te whenua. Ko te kawa ki a tāne mātua, ko te kawa ki a hine ahuane, ko te kawa ki a hine tītama, ka puta whāki, ko te ira tangata ki te whai au ki te ao marama hoki. Whakamāturuturu tia te a i kōmau, te a i taito, e rongo whakairihi a kia kirunga, turuturu o whiti whakamaua, kia teina, hui e, tāiki e. Ai, te mihi tuatai. Ka tīmata tātou i wainga nui te uru tapu nui tanga o tātou atua mā. A tēnei whakapapa ka taikirangi nui a tāmaku nā wai imo i a papatu anuku, koi nei tō tātou pāia, te a uri nei no o nei ai tātou. Ko mātou, arā ko te Aotearoa Taranaki whānui, ko kautau ngā mātanga i hara mai ki konei, kei tātou ngā kaitiaki mo e nei taongana nui, arā ko tō tātou pāia. Koe nei te tai ononga i wainga nui a tātou i tēnei rā, i tō tātou kaupapa. Nō reira, e ngā kaitiaki, mai te rā whānau, mai te rā whānau, mai te rā roe, kia ora tātou katoa. E mihi kaua nei nāia nei ki tō tātou kiingi, a kiingi tūtei te pōtatau te wheropero, te tuawhitu. Rā, ko te whare Kahui ariki, ko te mana o te paki o matariki, tūtonu mua ke tonuna. Ia ai, koe nei, ko tērā hononga mai Taranaki whānui ki te whānau o Waikato rā ko te kiingitanga mai aua wā o te takanga. Nō reira, koe nei te hononga i wainga nui i a Maua. Nō reira e tō tātou kiingi a kiingi tuheitea, mau te karoria, rire hau pai mai. E mihi kauana i nāia nei ki te hunga i arohaina e tātou kua we atu ki te pō. Rātou kua haere ki te papātanga roa a hine mō ana ki te tatau o te pō, ki te whare mahana o hine nui te pō a hine te iwa hoki. E maumaharana tia au ki te te i kaumātua ngō Ngāti mutunga Untitled kua whetūrangi tia i te rā wikine, kai ure nui, e te whaia, moi mai. O tira, ki te hunga mate i wainga nui a tātou i tēnei rā, ka miia, ka tangihia, ka poro aketia. Tuera i ngā tini mate, ngā mate o te matahina, te mata tamanui te rā, ngā mate o te tau, ai haere atūra. A piti hono tātai hono rātau te hunga mate ki a rātau, a piti hono tātai hono tātou te hunga ora ki a tātou, ki ora tātou katoa. Mai te kau o te raukura o te Aotearoa Taranaki whānui, e mihi kauana ki a tātou. Nau mai ara mai hoki mai anō mā tātua waka, te Whakatōhea, ara mai anō ki tō roe nei. Ki te takiwa o te whanganui ātara, arā ko te upoko o te ika. E mai maharana tia ki tētai pā o Ngāti ira, ara ko rangi tatau, No reira, kei runga I tō tātou tūpua ko whakaitai. Ko e rā pā o awanui ārangi, te Whakatōhea, rangitāne, Ngāti ka hununu kaitau. No reira, e ngā iwi Māori o Aotearoa, nau mai ki mai anō ki te upoko o te ika. E ngai Māori o te ao huri huri katoa. Ai, mai Amerika, mai te whenua o Moemoeia, nau mai piki mai, kake mai. Te upoko o te ika ka karanga atu rā ki ngā kohinga mana e tau nei I runga I te aroha. Ai tika rā mihi rawa atu ki a koutou, mihi rawa atu. Ka tuku atu tētai kōrero tuku iho e mea mai ana ki te wāhi nei o te upoko o te ika no. I raro I te taumarumaru, I raro I te kaitiakitanga o tō tātou iwi te Aotearoa. Koe nei. Koe nei tētai karakia, mai tōku rangatira kura moe au. Tākina te hauka riri, tākina te hauka ngua, tākina ngā au o te tonga, tākina ngā au o te whanganui iatara. Nā tai ekenga o tāwhiri mātea, tākina I arongo te whenua. Korongo ki te whakatipua, korongo ki te whakatawito, e rū I te one iuta, e rū I te one itai, e rū I aranginui e tuake nei kia papatu aluku e takoto nei, e rū I a tangaroa. Pū e te one pākini te one ko te one itua, ka makawarua karanga tipua, karanga tāpito ki tōna whakamāroro. E toka aumi I aroha, e toka aumi I rongamau, kia māko ai te hauriri, kia māko ai te haungua, heke heke iho I te rangi, ka tutua niwa, ngā hauhoro ki waho I te hau pāmai waho, ngā hauriri ki te hau mārino o te whanganui iatara. I te au te pō, I te au te pō, hau a whiowhio, hau mā takataka, hau no te awa o te ora, hau ki te whanganui iatara e hai. E me mai ana tērā karakia, ruruku, ko te hau o te tonga, arā, ngā hau o te whanganui ate, tere ana, ngau ana, pērā āhuatanga o ngā hau o te tonga. Engari, ka tutua niwa ngā hau horo ki waho, tērā wāhanga o te karakia, e mea mai ana, you can't beat Wellington on a good day. Engari, no reira, nau mai piki mai e te wānau. Tēnā koutou katoa, mai te āhuatanga o tērā ingoa o mātou marae, Waiwiri, ko te ingoa o tērā whare tūpuna ko aroha nui ki te tangata. No reira, mai tērā whakaaro pai, ka tuku atu te aroha mai o mātou ngā kau kia tātou. No reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. Oh, it's just me on the pie today. Yeah, tāku waiata. Oh, fun. Te kura I huna, te kura I tūpua, te kura I tāwhito, te kura I tiki mai Hawaii ki. Ka apitia, te nuku, ka apitia, te rangi, ka tēnā, ka wena, ka toka. Te kura ki runga ki te whenua, ki runga ki te tangata e tau nei. E rongo whakairi hia ki runga. Turuturu o piti whakamaua kia tīna. Uie, tai ie. Kei a koutou te kura I huna, te kura I tupua, te kura I tāwito, te kura I tiki mai Hawaii ki. Arā o koutou Hawaii ki e hora nei te ao huri. No reira e ngai Māori katoa o te ao. Tēnā koutou. Kia ora tātou.
Ka tira ka tuake. Maruhi atu I runga tirahonga te tohu whakari. Whakarere atu te whaiwhai a te mate tonu atu. Whakaihu mau tō hora tā papana te rei o kōhi. Te mate te whakamā he patu. Ana Waiwiri tō ringa te waka. Hiko te ura haruru te rangi. Ngā ko te whenua I ka huirua. Tapu te wai, tapu te tai ki te rātou awa te atua. eke aro. Whakaheke mata moe wai piko huri hia rūri matutu tara noa mua I hokue. Ruku hia te hāpuku te wheke tapu te moana. Tō ia tō hope hammata tū timu te koko ngāta mahinea te whakatōhea. Takahia te pipitahe aku pōtiki pāki hikura ki uta kura ki wahu. Kapa huki te waipara takoto te ono. Kōpū e oho kai kirikiri tua waiawa te kai a te karorokoa. Toto ia tū, toto ia mai. Mai ngā kuri a whārei ki te hirau e I te tapu o muri wai e. Reira me tika. Ka mihi atu ki tō tātou asu ki runga rau tō tātou kai hanga. Nā te asu I timata hia I ngā mea katoa. Nāna hoki e whakausi ngā mea katoa no rere he korore ki tōna ingoa tapu. E tautoko ngā mihi kia rātou mā ngā mate huhua o te wā o te motu. Ki runga I ngā marae maha. Ngā iwi katoa, haere atu rā koutou. E whakaro nui anō I tētai o ngā whanaunga I tira hanei I tēnei wā ki runga I tō tātai marae o Puke. Kai ngā tira hapu, kai roto I te whakatōhea. No rere whae Sharon, moi mai rā, oki atu kia rātou karanga tū kia koe. Ka tai atu. Ka tae se koe ki te wā, ki te rere atu ki te rata hataare. Rere moi mai koutou, haere atu rā. Rere ka ki mai ki te kaupapa o te wā. Tēnei hui e tuake nei. Aotearoa ka mihi atu kia koe e te rangatirea mihi mai, ka ranga mai kia mātou. Ngā iwi katoa I tae mai ki ata nei. Ki runga I tō whenua, ki runga I tō papa. Aotearoa ka wānganui I tō iwi. Te Aotearoa nei rā te mihi. Rere ka mihi atu ki ngā Mōunga e tuake nei. Ki te moana, whanganui atara. Ka mihi atu ki a rāua. Aotearoa ki ngā whānanga hapu ngā marae. Oko nei, kai te mihi, kai te mihi. Ka mihi anō ki tēnei o tātou whare e tuake nei. Ka raro I te tuani o mātou. I whakakao I roto I te kaupapa o te wā. Te kaupapa o ngā iwi katoa. E haranko te Māori ana. Ko ngā iwi take. Mai ngā hau e whā. Ko tae mai ki runga I a koe. Ko tira ki runga I a koutou te Aotearoa. Tēnei te mihi. Ka ranga mai anō ki te kaupapa o te wā. Nei tō tātai tia mana mo te kaupapa. Local context. No Amerika. O tira tō tātai whanaunga hoki. No te Whakatōhea Maui. I te matahia e rātou. Kia Jane hoki. I tēnei kaupapa. He kaupapa pai mō mātou ngā iwi take. Ki te tiaki ngā taonga, ngā mātauranga, kai roto I ngā iwi kato. Hoi anō, ko tai mai te wā mō tātou ki ngā iwi kato, ki te tiro atu ki ngā kaupapa o iaiwi, o iauwi, mai te ao, ki te tiaki a mātou I ngā taonga o mātou. No reira, ko tai mai mātou, I runga I te aroha te manakitanga, ki te whakarongo, ki te tiro atu, ki ngā huarahi pai, mō ngā iwi, ki te mahi I te tahanga, whare taonga, kai roto I pōneke nei, o tira ki te whai atu hoki, te whakahoki e ngā taonga ki tō mātai rohea te whakatōhea o tira ki o rātou iwi, o iano. Ka te kaupapa o te wā, ki te tiro atu anō, ki ngā tohu, tiaki mō ngā taonga, me ngā mātou. Nō nei rā, ngā kai rangahau, nei rā ngā whānau, I tae mai I roto I runga I te kaupapa o te wā, te local context meki. Nō kāre I roto mihi. Ki te tūakau I tēnei wā I roto I te tikanga, te whakautu tō mātou mihi ki a koe, te rangatira. Nā koutou tiaki ia mātou o ngā rā e tūru kai te heke mai, nō reira tēnā koe. Tira mihi mai ki te whānau katoa, nō reira tēnā koe, te Aotearoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Tērā te ahi e ka ngaira.
Kai nuku wai. Nā tori ngā rawa koe. I kia mihi atu Kohorona toka umai Hai toho waha Hai whake ki te Mōunga E tu o hune Te kōrero whakamutunga Ko rā te waiato o tātou tipuna te kōti ai ki rangi tata atu ki tōna matenga e whai atu ki tōna hoa i tiaki ana ki ai e wai ana, rai mahara ki ngā tipuna i whai atu rātou ki o rātou whānau hoi ana ko rā o tātou waiata mōna mō te kōti nuri rā apiti hono tātai hono rātou te hunga mate kia rā te apiti hono tātai hono tātou te hunga ki runga nuri tēnā koe ko tira tēnā koutou tēnā tātou katoa tēnei tō tātou koha ko te wā nuri rā tēnā
koe kia ora rā ka tuku atu tētahi karakia hei whakakapi o te wāhanga nei o te tikanga arā ko te aukau ka mea mai atu te whakamārama o te tikanga o te runga katoa i roto i te reo Pākehā. Tēnei anō te arorangi nui e tuake nei kia papatu anuku e takoto nei. Tēnei te arorangi rau ko papa e takoto nei kia rarau te taku wai o tāne ki raro tēnei te pō. Nau mai anō te ao, karangatia te ao e piri, karangatia te ao e piri e tata. Manawa tina, manawa tina, manawa toka. Tēnei hoki tō manawa ka tina, tēnei hoki tō manawa ka toka, tēnei hoki tō manawa ka pautai ki tia. Tīna noho tō manawa, e manawa ora, e ora. E rongo whakairi hia ke kironga, turuturu o whiti whakamaua, kia tīna, hui e, tāi, ngā mihi. Kia ora i te iwi. Just want to acknowledge our Pai Festival. Thank you very much for being reciprocal and upholding our tikanga and our ways. And, you know, not used to having a pai in this sort of arrangement, but hey, we can be versatile as Maui, you know, like that. We'll make things happen. So, mihi aroha kia koutou. If you don't know who I am, my name is Nate, and I'm from our local iwi here, or our Maori tribe. The common term that's used, if you don't know, I know some of our Māori people will know here, but I understand we have people from all countries here, te whenua moemoeia, our indigenous whānau from the Americas as well. So just going to share, I can go down rabbit holes, but I can hear my auntie going, you got 30 seconds. She's not here with me today to keep me in line, so I'll like to keep my conscience at the front of my head. We're what we call ahika. And ahika is a term that's used, I never heard it back in the day, but it's come around and it's quite commonly used. And it's those that keep our fires, the home fires, burning in our regions, in our local areas. Because there's lots of Māori tribe here in Aotearoa and Te Waiporangi. So we're just one here in Wellington. And so, we are the ones that keep the home fires burning. Many of our people, particularly here in Whanganuiatara or Wellington, many whānau come from different iwi here, and many of our iwi go out into the world. But there's always a collective of ones at home keeping those fires burning, waiting for those people to return when the time is right. So koinei te rā momo, or tētahi momo āhuatanga. That is one example of what ahika means. So our iwi name is Te Aotearoa Taranaki whānui. You might be wondering, if you know where Taranaki is, how did Taranaki get here? We've been here for a long time. There's an ancient narrative that goes back even to our tupuna, Awanuiarangi as well. We have relations to our mātātu awaka through Awanuiarangi too, Ngāti awa, taino atu ki Te Aotearoa. And so we have a narrative, or what we call kōrero tukuiho, te hunga o te Kahui Mōunga. Our ancient ancestors before the Polynesian, our te moana nui a kiwa, the people of Polynesia came here, were born on the slopes of our sacred mountain, Taranaki, which is on the west coast of Aotearoa. And when we were born off the slopes, this was after the time our great ancestor, Maui, not Maui here, but might be, you never know, he might be, we're all descendants of Maui. Maui, you might know, some of you might have seen the show Moana with Maui in there. Maui is very well known in Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, not only by people here in Aotearoa and Waiponamu, but all over the Pacific. We all relate to Maui. This is my view anyway. And one day he casted his great matau, or hook, out into the oceans when he was on a waka or a canoe with his brothers, and he heaved up a great big fish called Te Ika Nui a Maui, which we know as today more commonly as the North Island. So if you look at that, you'll see the shape of the ika of his great big fish that he heaved out. Now after he heaved it out, him and his brothers got off their waka, and they started to cut it up. And where we stand today is the head of the fish. We call it te upoko o te ika. So we're standing in the great head of the fish. The Tararua ranges, or there's some mountain ranges over there, that's the spine of the fish. And if you go into the center of the fish, you'll find some ancient Mōunga, tongariro, ruape'u, and it's where our mountain Taranaki once used to be, in the central plateau with those other Mōunga. Now a huge natural phenomenon happened, and it shifted Taranaki Mōunga to the west coast. Now there's another kōrero tuku iho though, that some of you might know. Tūwhare Toa will tell it. That's a iwi in the central plateau. There's a story that there was a wahine Mōunga, or a female element Mōunga, and named Pihanga. And Tongariro, Ruapehu, Taranaki, Utauaki, all of the Mōunga that were in those areas, all wanted to be with Pihanga. And they had a great big huge battle, and it ended up in Taranaki losing the battle and him having to shift down to the west coast to leave that area, which created what we call our Whanganui River. So it was that time, and our people were born here. I'm almost done, whānau. And they went on to the Mōunga here. Anyone know where Wainui or Mata Hill is? Yeah. So the name for that mountain is Puketapū, and it's where our ancestors, when they were born on the site of Taranaki, came to Puketapū, and they recited what we call Te Hau Tupua, the great karakia to summon 4 taniwha, or 4 ancient ancestors that were living in our rivers here. One was named Waiwhetū, which is the name of our marae in Waiwhetū. One is Awamutu, which is a stream that still is there today. Another taniwha was Ngake, and the other one is Whataitai. This is a very unique narrative of this area, whānau. So the mountain people wanted to open up, because our harbour, you've all been to the Wellington Harbour now? Yeah, that used to be a lake in the old times, before it became a harbour. And our tupuna recited these karakia to summon those taniwha, or those natural supreme beings. And one of them, Ngake, got sick and tired of living in this lake, because that's all they knew. And they wanted to go up to the Okawa Strait. And so Ngake built up the strength and jumped over and smashed out and opened up the mouth of the fish. Yeah. Whataitai, the brother, he was not as energetic or as fit as Ngake. He was a bit more laid back, they say. He tried to do the same on the western side of the harbour, but he got stuck because the tail of Ngake, the splashback, he couldn't resist or get enough power to go over. So he became stuck. And the story goes that a great earthquake happened here, Hao Whenua, and because of that he got lifted out of the water and he died. And he's what we call the island, it used to be an island before the earthquake, Motukairangi, or Mirima, I should say. It's a Spanish word for sea view. So Mirima is Whataitai. That is the tuturu, or the authentic name for that island. Some call it Te Motukairangi, that came after Whataitai. So Whataitai then died and transformed into a manu. A manu is a bird. And there's a saying there on our mountain, Matairangi, or some call it Mataitarangi, that you'll hear tangi te kio. the sound of the bird, and that's him. But we have another way of saying, if you stand on that mountain, Mount Victoria, you will see Tangi Te Kio. If you look at Miramar Island or Whakatau, you'll see the shape of the bird. If you go on your phones now and go on Wikipedia and look up Miramar, you'll see Tangi Te Kio. It's not the mountain over there, it's the island. Because once that earthquake happened, it transformed into a bird. Nō reira, koe nei te tai kōrero tuku iho o tō tātou roe nei. Hopefully, what do you do with that is up to you. It might spark a few journeys for you, I don't know. Put that in your digital space. No. Wikipedia's got no. All right, well, kia ora rā whānau. From our symbol of peace and love, love to you all and have a good kaupapa. Kia ora. Who do I trust? Come on. Yeah. Okay, come on. I should have prefaced, I got to go, whānau, there's another kaupapa I got to go. Maui's here anyway, you know.
Just gotta press a couple buttons. Sorry.
Press a couple of buttons, okay.
And then mic. Okay. This. You're gonna choose. Okay.
I'll make it fun.
Kia ora koutou. Tēnā roto mihi kia koutou. Ko te wāhanga o te okawa. Mō reira e haere ana te kaupapa. So, for those of you that have come from overseas, I know we had this talk yesterday that here in New Zealand we're very liberal in the way that we put Māori words into our English. And even when people start in te reo, and then they go, I'm going to speak Pāke, and then they carry on in te reo as well. And so you're kind of wondering what's going on. But look, I just wanted to acknowledge Nate and the mana whenua coming along. A couple of reasons. One was sort of standing outside talking to him beforehand, and he's going, what's the Māori word for local context? And I'm going, I don't know, I haven't kind of worked that out yet. But he talked about, I was thinking actually was sort of sitting down there around the word ukaipo. So there's the whole thing about going back to the place that kind of grounds you, which is always, sort of the local place that you come from. And then he was talking about the ahika and the people that are responsible for keeping those sort of fires burning. So I think it was really a sort of a nice reference and gift that he spoke about. And also that he shared kōrero from this place as well. He shared stories from this place, traditional knowledge, traditional names, those things. And that's essentially what we're here to talk about, is the way in which we share those stories that connect us to place, that connect us to each other, and the way in which that then starts to move around the world in different ways. And so he was here talking to us, and I guess there was in some ways, some kind of unspoken agreement between us about how we might take that and how we might use that. But at the same time, we're also here live streaming it out to the world, out to other places, where people haven't got to kind of see him in person and feel his energy in the same kind of way. And so that recording then gets seen and used, and other people will think about what he's talked about, all those names, and think, okay, how can I use this for another kaupapa? And knowing what that right way of connecting that sort of protocol, his sort of tikanga around that sharing is with his story. So I think it's a reminder in some ways about some of the things that we're working with, and how we have this knowledge which we share in a really sort of organic way, but at times it starts to then get fixed in a place, on a record, on a recording, and then that's the thing that moves around the world. So just wanted to acknowledge him for being here and for doing that, and welcome you all for being here, because it's really exciting for us to be holding a local context summit here. I had one in the US earlier in the year, so this is the second summit, second chance to talk about all the great things that different communities have been doing, different institutions have been doing. We're trying to ensure that, actually I was back on another slide, Indigenous authority and control and governance is sort of represented in all of these institutional spaces. But what I'd like to do is just first up invite, also he already introduced me, Maui, not from Moana. My hair's not long enough. But Maui Hudson, no te Whakatōhea, and just thanks to Daniel, my whanaunga from Whakatōhea also for responding as well. And even though, we've got all these sort of changes that seem to be happening here in Aotearoa, the whare mere and that sort of thing, despite what you see on the news, there's the right way of doing things, and people are going to do that anyway, I think. So it was nice that was also represented here as well. So just want to introduce first James Francis, the chair of the Local Context Board. Philip.
Thank you, Maui. And thank you all for coming here today. When I spoke at the end of the last summit in New York City, I think the first word I just said was amazing. And I just let it sit there for a while. I've been doing this work for a long time, more than a decade. I work for my community as the director of cultural and historic preservation. Eyes and ears are open in my community to a lot of problems that a lot of indigenous communities grapple with. How do we approach these problems? Local context has really helped our community to do that. I've been a client, so to speak, of local context for a long time. Met Jane more than a decade ago. Some of the questions that we really struggle with is, how do we reconcile the settler colonialism that has traumatized our community members and taken our cultural heritage items and categorize them, and they sit in institutions all over the world. For me, the latter is going to help heal the former. That if we can solve where our cultural heritage items, things that were crafted by the hands of our ancestors, those beings need to come off the shelves and they need to come home. That will heal our communities. In my tenure as the Director of Cultural and Historic Preservation for my tribe, I have engaged with local context, and as a former co-director of Local Context and now the chair of the Local Context Council, I have witnessed a lot of changes in local context. Not just the obvious, more recent change of becoming a nonprofit and everybody got new titles and it's really exciting. And we brought Stephany on as our founding executive director. But there's been change all along. And what was amazing about that summit in New York City was I witnessed a lot of these changes, and changes that I wasn't expecting. It's important to note that this wasn't changes that local context was doing overtly. We were just responding to what indigenous communities needed. And by doing that, local context shifts, and it's very malleable in that way. So when we get together in this format as a summit, it truly is a summit, because it's all of these great ideas that come together. And sometimes it's surprising to me, because what you all are doing in Indigenous communities through local context and engaging with local context is always so refreshing. It really kind of begs the question, what is possible? What really is possible? And I think that it really goes back on the kind of the principles that local context was built upon. I mean, it's in the title, it's about local. It's about, Maui talked about how they talked about this very region, but it's about all our regions, and it's about to be Indigenous means to be connected to place. And it's all of those stories, and local context embodies that just in the title, but also in our principles, because it's always been a priority for Indigenous communities. And we not only embody that in what we offer as tools and how we operate, but also in our leadership and in our, what makes up who is the staff and the council of local context. So I want to thank you all for coming, and I'm excited. It's the first time I've been in this hemisphere of this planet. Little fish out of water currently, but up at 1 o'clock in the morning to call my wife as she wakes up, and a day behind too. But it is my distinct pleasure to now introduce our founding executive director. I'll try not to embarrass you. Stephany RunningHawk Johnson.
He hana washte. Good morning. I'm Stephany. I'm a citizen of the Oglala Lakota Nation. And I am like James, this is my first time in this hemisphere, and I am so incredibly grateful and honored to be here and to have had Nate share his stories. It means a lot, and I very much appreciate it. So Jean had asked me to introduce myself. As a few of you know, this is actually my second day of work. So thank you all for being here with me on day number 2. I'm doing a lot of learning, as you can imagine. But to introduce myself and to tell you a little bit about who I am and where I come from, and perhaps why I'm here. And I can't start a story of who I am without talking about my grandfather. My grandfather is Lawrence RunningHawk, also a citizen of Lakota, Oglala Lakota Nation. And as a child, I spent so much time with him, and I learned so much from him about being a good human being and what that means to be connected to place, and what it means to be an Indigenous person. And at the same time, I grew up in a very Western world, as did most of us, I suppose. But he always wanted me to be educated. And what he meant by educated was school's important, yes, but that's this beginning of learning and of being educated and of learning about other people and hearing folks' stories and learning from stories and learning through relationship. So I have a science background. I really liked science in school. So I have a bachelor's degree in forestry and in natural resources, but it was really a journey of this Western idea of what natural resources are versus thinking about our more than human relatives and how do we take good care of them and how do we live with them in responsible ways. And then I thought, well, I think I'll be a teacher. And so I did become a teacher, and I taught math and science to middle schoolers, at least in US context. So kids from the age of about 11 to 14 or so. And I loved that. And at the same time, I saw a lot of systemic problems, both in science and in education. So then I thought, well, okay, I'm going to continue to be a teacher, but I'm also going to become a researcher. And I work with Indigenous communities. A lot of my work is in the Pacific Northwest. A lot of it's with Yakama Nation, with the Nimipu Nation, with Colville, with Coeur d'Alene, with Warm Springs, on how do we, you can use the word decolonize. With the communities I like to work with, I like to use the word indigenize. How do we indigenize science education for these folks? How do we create experiences that are culturally and nourishing? And then we can connect into the science standards at the same time, right? So that's kind of the background. That's where I came from. But when this opportunity for local context came along, I thought, oh, it's kind of a long shot, but I'm gonna throw my name in there because this is really exciting. And I think that it's so exciting because what local context does really centers the Indigenous, and we need that. We need somebody to fight the institution, or to reimagine how our voices and our stories are just as important and just as in the forefront when we do science, because we do science all the time. We've been doing science since time immemorial, and we need our voices to be told, and our voices to be heard and to be present and to be in the forefront. So I am so excited to get to be here with you on day number 2 and to be part of local context and to be the founding executive director. That means I'm going to tear up. That means so much to me that you all would trust me with that responsibility. And I'm so excited to be here because it means I get to get started learning along with you and being educated in a whole new way. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to the community, and thank you to the iwi here to allow me to do this work today. So, Wopila tanka. Thank you.
So kia ora. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting when people are speaking, and so James talking about the summit, what a summit is, and I think that's the intention today, is to sort of like, you're on the summit, you can see everything that's happening around you, and this is our chance to kind of step back and look and see what's happened over the last 6 months, over the last 12 months in terms of the development of local context and where things have been moving with the labels. And I kept realised, so we're going to have a mix of sort of panels, people talking and sharing things, opportunities to ask some questions right through the day. If you've seen the program, you see how it's all been laid out. And then this evening, the film screening for those that are able to come along. But just to start off with, Corrie and I, or mostly Corrie, is going to share some sort of high-level highlights about things. And about and then we'll have a session with our other colleagues from IDEA around the design of the labels. So that big team that came in late, the one that walked across after everything had already started, that was IDEA. Kia ora. Kia ora. Creatives, yes. No sense of time, but they get beautiful work done. So I think there's a couple of things which I just want to highlight, just in terms of the evolution of local context. James talked about his journey with it, alongside Jane being 10, 12 years long. I've been on about sort of 6 years, and it started out as this really kind of a research initiative, a project, and then a bit of a sort of a consortia. And we just really needed, for it to grow properly, it needs to have a proper home. And that proper home is rolled into being set up as a non-government organisation, an NGO. We're fortunate to get a significant amount of funds from the Mellon Foundation, which allows us to hire an executive director, put in place some staff, and really try and ground things for the next couple of years. So that's been really good. one of the important things for us, and James talked about sort of the values that sit behind it, making sure that it was Indigenous led. And so because of the content, because of the communities which we're trying to support, because of the responsibility to share their tikanga, their protocols that are represented through the labels, it needed to be based in Indigenous spaces as much as possible. So we incorporated on the Navajo Nation. We've made sure that there's a majority Indigenous council, just recognizing that, you know, we are working with organizations, we are working with institutions, all the places where our taonga, where our mātauranga have ended up in. And so it's important to know how those systems work and to access things. So we have our settler colleagues helping as well. But we have an Indigenous chair. You've met the chair, you've met our founding executive director, and we're doing our best to ensure that we hire Indigenous staff and collaborate with Indigenous businesses like Idea, who will talk in a second as well. Our team has grown from mostly being Jane to me and Jane and a couple others, to now a sort of group of 20 plus people between the council and the staff and the contractors in different ways. And so that's meant that we've just got a little bit more capacity to support the growth and the adoption and implementation of the labels in different places. And that's one of the big challenges, or not one of the big responsibilities is being able to not only just do the talk, but working alongside those groups and the capacity building elements of it, both with institutions, but especially with communities, being able to get them up. And, we've had that with Whakatōhea, just the time it takes for people to understand the usefulness and the purpose before it kind of rolls into the way in which they can operate. And just to highlight that actually this is sort of the range of places where we're working. So right across the globe. So at the moment, while the staff and the council, we've based them between the US and New Zealand, we are working with people in Africa, Europe, a little bit in Asia, a lot, and a lot of interest in Australia. I think that's kind of the next place which we need to grow some deeper roots, and it's great to have our different colleagues here from Australia, both from some of the institutions, but also the communities as well, here as well. So I think that's where I hand over to Corrie. This is one of those flash names, the Director of Outreach and Strategy. So kia ora, Corrie.
Kia ora. Thank you, Maui. Kia ora koutou. Hi, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Corrie Rowe, Director of Outreach and Strategy at Local Contexts. Very grateful to be a guest here as well. As you might be able to tell from my accent, I'm from the United States, as was today known as the United States, Turtle Island. I'm a settler there. I live outside New York City on today known as Connecticut on Paugussett and Wappinger lands. I'm very grateful to be a guest here today on these lands. We just wanted to share a couple really exciting examples, and you're going to hear from some of these folks later, so we're going to be very quick. So we're very excited about the use of the labels in this app, the Waiata app. This is from Whakatōhea, who you'll hear from shortly. And this is their app with their Waiata, and they've added their labels to these Waiata in the app, which you can download from the App Store and Google Play and see those labels in action. This is also a recent exciting example, use of the labels. This is by the Stockbridge Munsee Band of Mohicans. And this is actually in a medicine garden. So they're using the labels on the markers for the plants. So there's the native name for the plants. And they're also using the labels in the pamphlets and on the website that go with this garden. You're going to hear from Manaki Whenua very shortly, but we are very excited about the use of the notices and the labels on this huge collection. So we always like to show the numbers because they're very exciting. Use of our API through our website, and the use of the notices on all of these collections, these national collections from Manaki Whenua. And this looks like this on one of the records, the BC notice. This is connected to our website where the project exists with the notice. And then just to highlight one other recent example, this is the Academy of Natural Sciences of Drexel University. They're using notices on their website as well. So they have the Open to Collaborate notice, which you can see on the left there. That is on their homepage, which is very significant and exciting. And then on the right, this is the Lewis and Clark Herbarium. These are the plant specimens that were collected by Lewis and Clark. And they were obviously collected from Indigenous lands. So this notice is being applied here to acknowledge that. They're also embarking on a multi-year project to work with those communities to connect that material to those communities. So just a couple of exciting examples. You're going to hear from more folks today, but we're going to pass it off to, oh, I'm so sorry, University of Queensland. One more. So we've been very excited to see the use of the notices by a couple of universities in Australia. One of them is the University of Queensland. This is their digital repository for theses, and they're using two of the notices, Open to Collaborate and Attribution Incomplete, which we just wanted to highlight as well. Sorry to forget that slide is coming. We have a couple networks that I'm going to plug because we would love to have all of you. They are virtual. They meet every other month or so. We are aiming to start up some more regional networks, but we do have ones for Indigenous communities, for cultural institutions, and for technical implementation. We also have some info sessions and hub demos coming up in case you're interested. And if you didn't get these links, talk to me after and I'll hook you up. But that's it from me. Thank you.
Needs no introduction.
Kia ora, no Inganani, no Kotarana, no Ārani, toku Puketapū, no Whangarei, no Mahurangi, toku whānau, kei tangata tiriti te iwi. Kei Adea hau, a mahi ana, kei Airambeia hau, e noho ana, ko John Moore toku ingoa. Kia ora.
Tēnā tātou katoa. He uri tēnei, ngō Ngāti Naho, ngā Ngāti Hineuru, ngō Ngāti Tara hoki. No Taranaki ahau, he mahi ana hau ki Idea, ko Renee Waiwiri tōku ingoa. Kia ora, I'm Renee. I am a designer from Idea. And really great to see our team come late, but kia ora.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that team. I've got a few notes here because I'm prone to kind of going down a bit of a rabbit hole, as Nate was saying earlier. So hopefully this will keep me on track. So IDEA, Indigenous Designer Innovation Aotearoa. It was founded in 2017 by Miriam Barbarich, myself, and Johnson Witihira. Sadly, Miriam passed away last year, but her vision to use an Indigenous worldview to make global change still drives the work that we do every day. Leading that work is our amazing team of Indigenous designers, researchers, and innovators. I'm very privileged as one of only 2 non-Indigenous members of our team to work alongside both Rangatira and Rangatahi every day, some of whom you'll have seen kind of sneak in a little late, sitting up behind you. Our focus is to make a real impact on the lives of Māori and all Indigenous people first and foremost, but alongside that make Aotearoa a truly bicultural country and an awesome place to live. And I think based on the events of the last kind of week or so, I think we really need to double down on that. Through our mahi, we aim to influence and lead a global change in the design of places, products, and services. And we have our studio in the heart of the city here at Whanganui-a-Tara. Once again, Nate kind of gave you a little bit of a background as to where that sits. We look out over what was the original lake and now the harbour, in what is, I think Atapai Tibble has kind of dubbed our office the marae in the sky. a place of aspiration and inspiration. So a little bit of a journey and our connection, our initial connection to the local context Mahi. Like many of our projects, it first came into our radar through our connection with Maui from the University of Waikato. We've worked with Maui on numerous projects over the years, some of which we're showing you here, some of which will be familiar to some of you, but a lot of those involving data sovereignty, genomics, and like connecting global networks. Understanding the context of this particular mahi, Maui sends us these amazing complex PowerPoints. This is one of them, and he said, "See, it's quite simple. We'd love for you guys to help us design some labels and some notices." So after a while, we got another PowerPoint, this time from Jane. This made a lot more sense. Despite the fact that we had to wade through 232 slides, which you can see a little count at the top there. Yeah. So Jane and Maui suggested that we sit in on the next local context session to really get to know what local contexts do and how the labels work and what the new biocultural labels would need to do. That was our initial brief. So obviously we jumped at the chance. So you've had a little bit of a look at what the local context labels do and some of those really new examples that we've seen, which is amazing. Our initial brief was to, as I say, to make a set of new biocultural labels to add to the existing traditional knowledge labels. But we really had to dig in deep and work out what work the labels were doing. And how would we as designers approach this? Our role as designers is about making connections. That might be connecting people with services, it might be connecting people with information, it might be providing clues about where to go, about whether something might be reasonably priced or premium. You know, we use design for all of those kind of clues. As people, we like to make connections too. Our pepeha, or our introduction, connected you to our ancestors. In my case, they came from England, Ireland, Scotland. It connects me to my family when they arrived in Aotearoa and settled up in Whangarei and Hikurangi. And making those connections visible to you connects you to me. So it is about making these invisible connections visible. They connect us with our past, and in doing so, that establishes our connection to the future. And that's exactly the work that the local context labels do. Whether it be a taonga or treasure that's been acquired by a settler institution, now displayed on their website, or the digital record of genetic material, also taonga, which might be collected by researchers and stored in a much less visible database. The local context labels connects these taonga with their Indigenous community. But visually, the labels make us stop and take notice. They enable us to make connections so that we can hear the authentic stories and understand the community's intent, and they really unlock the relationship. So it really is about connecting back to people. So the labels as they stood when we were first introduced to the project, they were mostly these ones. I think we have since added to these with the TK Clan, the TK Creative, and the Open to Collaboration. The original labels and icons were designed in collaboration with a US-based designer, Alexander Haig. And our brief was to add to these with the design of the new suite of biocultural labels. You know, as we've seen, the labels visually, they provide a really distinct, machine-readable, recognizable, and immediate link with the communities involved. They provide provenance, protocol, and permissions, and they lead us into that deeper understanding. So our first problem to solve, I guess, was how we distinguish the the TK labels from the BC labels, or the traditional knowledge labels from the biocultural labels. So we've got a really brief case study. I know we're kind of running a little bit late, so we'll try and keep it fast. We were looking at how we can make, once again, this has to be distinct. It has to be machine readable. It has to be something visual. So we were exploring whether we use typography, whether we use a T and a B, whether we strip out the icons and we really just use the text. But all of these seemed to really reduce and take away the meaning and the intent and the legacy of the work that had gone ahead of us. We started to look at what biocultural labels really meant. We explored trying to change the color or creating a bit of a microscope type shape so that we could get the sense of looking through a lens. As this work was going on, the team, which Renee will talk about shortly, were also looking at what the new iconography might be. And along the way, we came across these kind of 3 dots, which they could be used variously as markers for more information or for location. And we thought, that's a really great solution. So you'll see with the evolution of the labels where that comes into play.
So I connected with IDEA through my master's program, being Masters of User Experience Design in 2019. I got to work with 2 amazing designers, Petoni Grimm and Joyce Kim. We worked together with IDEA to design 6 biocultural labels for local contexts. Our direction we took, looking at the traditional knowledge labels and the kind of visual cues that it gives off in terms of providing that global understanding, was to kind of approach these as globally intuitive, and to ensure that all Indigenous communities, institutions and researchers could easily identify these labels without having to go into the definition if needed. We also focused on the biocultural matter and the collection and protection of biocultural matter in terms of how to develop forms and shapes that visually represent these labels. So the first one, I guess with all graphic design projects, we always thought start with pen to paper. That's the easiest and best way to communicate our ideas with our team. So for open to collaboration, we were obviously feeding off words such as collaboration, sharing, teamwork, and relationships in order to bring up some shapes and some forms to visually evoke those emotions. So you can see here are some drawings made by Petoni Grimm, and our final design here being the Open to Collaborate label that you would see today. So what we've used, obviously the 3 circles are there to define that there is a team, there is a squad behind collaborating together, as well as we've used this hexagonal form. It's a smart way to always indicate that there's many opportunities to collaborate, many opportunities to build relationships with institutions, researchers, and communities. So that's our first one. Our second label was research use. So research use represents the permission to use information, collections, and DSI information for research purposes. So thinking about that, we were thinking about research, investigation, scientific matters such as in labs, being able to investigate specimens, design active. So those like the kind of key forms or words that we were playing with, so that kind of populated ideas such as like beakers and petri dishes, magnifying glasses, easy indicators to help us understand that this is about research and it's about the action of investigating something. As to why we've come with our final design, which is a petri dish of specimens of some sort. And then provenance. So provenance obviously speaks to the origin, the place where a lot of our Indigenous materials have come from. So we really wanted to speak to the journey that those items have taken from origin to archives, institutions, and hopefully back to our homes. So you can definitely see here with the progression of the lines speaking to the journey that our Indigenous matter has taken. Seeing today these are what the biocultural labels look like at the moment. You see we've also added BC Plan and BC Outreach. But yeah, like these are always expanded depending on community needs, and we're always trying to be responsive to what our communities, institutions, and researchers need and sort. So this is it today, and I'm sure there'll be more in the future. I also wanted to just speak about our relationship with local contexts. It's been about more than 4 years that we've been with local contexts, and throughout that relationship, we've also been able to help design the local context hub that you may have seen. We've also helped with the Enrich networking, being able to form better relationships with researchers, as well as the online learning resources to help our communities, and continuously expanding the suite of Indigenous labels and notices. So, yeah.
Thank you. You can never trust PowerPoint with the typography, can you? So just to summarize then, that the work that the local context labels does is about maintaining those visible connections. It's about connecting past to present. It's about connecting our past and our present to our future. And it's ensuring that as Indigenous communities, we get to paint that line. It's about ensuring that institutions and researchers honour and respect that line. Or to paraphrase the words of our founder, Miriam Barberidge, on behalf of all of us here, past, present and future, the labels ensure it's never about us without us. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora. There's a whole lot of movement. When the first people started standing up, I thought they were coming to sing a waiata. I was like, yes, no, that's okay. And then everyone else started moving. Like, did I miss the call for morning tea? Anyway, hey, so look, I just want to acknowledge Miriam, who provided a lot of support for us with establishing thinking. I should probably send you my PowerPoints more regularly, because when you turn them into sort of statements like that, yeah, I think it makes it easier for everyone to understand. But also, this is I think a lot of work that sits behind all of the things. So you can kind of see a label end up in a place like we've seen with the examples, and even the ones that have just been shown. I've never actually seen all of that backstory either, and so it's really kind of nice to see the other work that goes into these things coming about, the other work that communities do, that businesses do, that researchers do to make things happen. And so that's where we're going to next. I'm going to invite down Danny and Aaron and Nathan to come and give some examples of the labels and notice and context. So kia ora. Push slide. Oh, look at that. Flash. See? More work that happens in the background and just appears. Have a seat. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm up. Okay.
You're up first. Come on.
He taonga, he awhina me manaki. Ka ti te tohe, ka ti te takahia, he taonga nui nei. Tahuri whakarongo, tahuri whakanuia, tahuri tiakina te taonga nei. Kaua e pōhehe, ka ora ake tonu, te hunga kaumātua e. Kia ora tātou. For those of you who, there was no picture on my name, so this is the face that should have gone with the name. My name is Danny Paruru. I'm from the Whakatōhea iwi on the east coast of the North Island. and it's a privilege for us to be here today. And I'm fortunate to, be a relation of Maui. When Maui came to us and asked if we'd like to pilot a project around traditional knowledge labels, how could we say no to this man over here? So it has been a journey for us. And over the last couple of years, we've really jumped in feet first into this space. But it has been an incredible journey, opening our eyes to what is possible around, in particular, looking after our taonga, our treasures, our mātauranga, our knowledge. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background as to who we are, I guess to place some context into the work that we're doing, particularly with local context. And I just want to introduce also Dickie, our tumu whakarai for the Whakatōhea Māori Trust Board, our CEO, and my role for the iwi. And I'm very privileged and lucky to be working for our iwi, and I have no desire to leave our town, our little community. And as long as we've got work like this in front of us, we'll always be living there. So this is what we'll cover off today. Who is Whakatōhea? I want to talk a little bit about the Whakatōhea regeneration, ki te whaiau, ki te ao marama, what our aspirations are as a tribe moving forward, and then looking at customizing TK and the BC labels and how we're using it today. So who is Whakatōhea? So we're a tribe, as I said before, based on the East Coast. Our main ancestor is Muriwai, who came off the Mātātua Waka. So she held a particular status in Māori society called a tapairu. So she was the closest thing that we would treat as being to God. So she was like our queen, and she had a specific mana that was unchallenged in her time. But she was very influential in the naming of certain places around the Bay of Tennessee coastline. And of course, our name, Whakatōhea, most iwi names are named after ancestors, but our name is derived from a characteristic. So Muriwai lost two of her sons who drowned at sea. And when the fishing party came back to get Muriwai, she displayed, I guess, a characteristic of grief and of stubbornness. So she wouldn't come out of the cave that she lived in. And so the term tohe translates as stubborn. So our tribal name, Whakatōhea, is derived from this character. It's just signifying a little bit of our culture back home. Ki te whaiau, ki te ao marama. This has been our journey. Prior to the arrival of the Pākehā to Aotearoa, our people were living traditionally, and we had 7 of our Whakatōhea chiefs sign Te Tiriti o Waitangi on the 27th and 28th of May in 1840. So that was our commitment to building a partnership and a relationship with the British. Unfortunately, as we built up our prosperity with the Aotearoa, our lands were confiscated, and there was a significant amount of loss of life, loss of land, loss of identity, and a loss of the well-being. So our people had to start from scratch. And over generations, there was trauma that is still felt today within our tribe. So now, I guess our journey is about going from trauma to transformation. And we are looking at this regenerative strategy called Te Tapu o Muriwai to reconnect us to our history, our stories. Te Tapu o Muriwai, again, which was the party that I shared this morning. This year, on the same date that our ancestors signed the treaty, we had a deed of settlement, again, thanks to Maui, who was one of our negotiators, a huge milestone for us to start moving forward. And now that we've done that, we can now move forward and look at reconciliation within society and with the Crown and with our key stakeholders around us. Our vision is based on a whakatauki, a proverb. So this goes way back. These are things that our ancestors taught us. Ko te kai hoki I waiawa. So why was this particular vision chosen? A whakatauki that goes back, many generations. It's a reminder about where we have come from, that our ancestors were able to sustain themselves, to thrive from the land, from the sea, from the rivers around them. So why can't we do the same thing? And that's the vision for us as a tribe, is to utilize our traditions, our culture, our heritage to move us forward into the future. Our purpose, kia ora ngā tira ai ngā uri o te Whakatōhea, is about providing that leadership to lift our people. So we want to grow and invest in the well-being of our people through many ways, but having our culture and our heritage as the foundation for us to do that. Without that, then, you know, where do we go? We don't have that purpose there in front of us. Back in 2010, we were fortunate enough to have conducted a wellbeing survey of our own people. So we wanted to ask questions of our people of things that we couldn't already find data on. So we wanted to find it if our whānau could go fishing and diving and grow their own gardens, whether they access services in our town. So it was a comprehensive survey. We managed to survey 750 of our whānau. The first time also that we'd asked them about their aspirations and their dreams for their tribe and for their community. And these were the top 8 things that our people had pointed out, that they wanted to have meaningful employment. So we're a small community on the East Coast. Back in the 50s and 60s, there was a migration of our people into the big cities. So those of us that were left at home were there, left trying to keep things turning. But the ones that were living at home want to have meaningful employment. Our people do want to live in our community. And they wanted to have healthy, well-educated and employed young people, that our iwi is thriving, that we also have a successful mussel farm venture. Thankfully, our mussel company has been in operation now probably for 10 years and currently has about 212 staff employed. So we're working towards these aspirations. That we also want to lead our economic prosperity within the community, that we want to have unity between each of the sub-tribes, our hapu, and that we have our treaty settlement completed. So at least we could tick a few boxes here and meet, considering this goes back to 2010. We have integrated strategies. These are our high-level strategies. There are 6 really important things to us, but right in the center is our whakatōhea, our way of being as Whakatōhea, our culture, our language and our identity. And as long as we keep that in the center, it keeps everything together. And it's a reminder about who we are, and we don't compromise on any of that. And I would imagine that each of you would feel the same. But we also have those other elements which are all interwoven. At the moment, as an entity, we have 6 separate strategies based on each of those key things, which all align to each other. So what are the traditional knowledge and biocultural labels to us? So for us, they are the digital markers for Indigenous communities to add existing local protocols for access and use to digital culture, cultural heritage. And they are educational in that they help non-community users who view the materials understand its importance and significance to the communities from where it derives. And what do the labels do for us as Whakatōhea? For us, it puts the data into context. It makes visible the provenance and the ethics of collection. And I'll talk a little bit about some examples a little bit later on. It foregrounds the relationships that makes research possible. We've built up relationships with institutions here in Wellington, Taonga Sound of Vision, Te Papa, and others. And it also helps to connect data to the people. So we only have 10% of Whakatōhea living within our rohe. So the 90% of people that are living away from our area, they want to learn more about who they are and where they come from. And so this is another way, I guess, that we can truly help to connect our people to who they are. So why do we use these for us as Whakatōhea? So it puts our voice as Whakatōhea on all of our taonga, our information and our knowledge. It also helps to reconnect our people to Whakatōhea taonga and mātauranga, currently sitting outside of our rohe. And there are lots of data sets and collections, physical taonga, but also documents and things that are sitting in museums and archives. And it also allows us as Whakatōhea to adapt the labels to our needs and share them safely within those institutions. So we are building up a really good relationship with those institutions to make sure that the application of these labels does happen. So what have we done? We had to go through a process within the iwi to teach ourselves what the labels are. And that did take a long time. So some of you that are on the journey of getting into the space, be mindful, I guess, is, when you do get into it, it is really deep and enriching. But it could take you time to teach yourselves and to teach the rest of your hapu and your iwi. So the descriptions, we also we looked at customizing them to suit the language that we would use as Whakatōhea. So the labels don't change, the meaning behind the label don't change, but we adapted the words. We also looked at the impact, the effects and the impacts this can have on our iwi. We had several wānanga with our iwi to engage with them, to teach them about how we could apply these labels. And our staff also underwent a number of training sessions as well. One of our staff actually developed a training package, which is really cool, and worked with IDEA as well, which is awesome. This is an application process that we developed for us. This is really useful for us. This is how, starting from scratch, if you were to get one item wherever it came from, whether somebody came in through the door or whether you engaged with somebody at an institution. So we would receive the item, then we would add that data to the metadata that we created, and then add it to our digital library, which we also created. Then we would assess all the metadata. So this is the challenging part, I guess, is spending time looking at the metadata, the information behind each of the items that we had, and then we will go through creating a project with a local context so that we would look at applying the appropriate labels to each of those items. So as you can see on there, there's several steps that we would take. And then it was important for us also to have a subcommittee or an advisory committee to oversee the whole process. I guess we could apply labels that we think would be suitable for a particular item. Like, for example, it might be a song or a waiata. And then we would have an advisory group that would come together to assess whether those were the right labels to apply to that particular item. And so that's the process for us that we are using at the moment for applying labels. Just as an example, this is what a metadata. Must be like Maui's process of adding things, data sets. But this is a metadata that we created for us. We wanted to try and align it to other metadata frameworks like Ngāti Sound and Vision, so that if we repatriated items like videos or sound files from Ngāti, that we could just copy and paste the metadata they have on their files and chuck it straight into ours, so that they would, kind of talk to each other. The other thing, though, is when we did receive stuff back from them, then we could look at applying, the TK labels and adding other descriptions if we knew that they were missing things on those items. And then, of course, as you've seen before, applying the labels on the local context sub. So this is a project, which was this one, the historical account for the Whakatōhea settlement. So this talks about our history. And on the right-hand side, you can see some of the labels that we had applied through the local context, which really gave more foundation to the document itself in terms of the history that was in there. We've also been lucky that as a part of the process, we created a digital library for us to house all the digital files and everything, videos, sound files, images, whakapapa, and we're still creating this and we're still building it for us as a tribe. But this gives you a little example of, there's a spelling mistake on there, I'm not sure if you can see it, but one of the documents that we've added there and the labels that we've applied, so that people, when they do a search, they can see what the protocols and the permissions are to access this particular document. And just another example, the Moana plan, which has just been released today, this year, for Whakatōhea, and just the example there with what labels we had selected for the Whakatōhea Moana plan. And as you saw before, the Waiata app, you're more than welcome to download it if you like. Play Store and wherever else. But this is an example of how we've used it outside of the local context kind of examples where we've taken the labels and applied them to each of those individual songs. Okay, so as you can see, and I've just highlighted one label there, the TK clan or the hapu one. So that applies to a specific waiata, which means that that particular waiata can only be used within that hapu. It can't be used outside of that hapu, and so on and so forth. And there might be some that are just specifically for whānau, some specifically for the iwi, or can be open for the community. So these are living things that we are using right now, where we are actually applying TK and BC labels. Our next steps moving forward, we'll continue to build our relationships with those institutions. I think it's really important that hold those inventories of our Whakatōhea treasures and our mātauranga. That will continue to build our capacity to implement the TK labels and the BC labels into business as usual. So that's the key goal for us, I think, is that it just becomes normal operation that we would apply these sorts of tools. But I guess that resourcing is also another part of that to make sure that we have the capacity to do so. And technology is really cool that we can utilize our digital resources to make connections between the different institutions, even manaki whenua, Whakatōhea, so that they're all talking to each other. And so koe rā noho, that's what I have to share for you today. Hope you've enjoyed the presentation. Kia ora tātou.
We'll hold the questions for after the other ones. So just write them down, save them for later. Whatever. So while he's getting set up, every time I go visit Danny, they've always done so much more than I thought. I'd take a few things to them and throw them something, and they turn it into something amazing. So, kia ora tātou.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko te huru o kahukura te Mōunga e Rowe no taku nākau, ko o pāwaho te awa e mahi nei aku maharahara, e mihi ana ni ngā tahu o nehi o Waitaha e ne nano nei au, ko Aaron Wilton taku ingoa no ototahi aho. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here today. It's quite humbling to come in and to have worked with these people and to follow on from the stuff we've already heard today. So the perspective today that I will give is from a collection holding institute of natural history collections. So we're the recipient of material that's been collected over the years, and really as custodians of those. So it's how can we better meet our obligations and our responsibilities in that role. So what I want to do is just say a little bit about the context in which we hold those specimens, and then about the pilot work that we've done with local context and for iwi in terms of trying the application of the labels and notices onto the collection. So just to, so Manaki Whenua is one of the Crown Research Institutes. It came out of the DSIR back in the 90s. But it has a real, an ethos and an understanding of the importance of connecting and of being good treaty partners. So this really fits with, as an organisation, where we want to be going, how we want to be working. I'm not sure how many of you will have the opportunity to visit natural history collections. So just to give you a feel for what I'm talking about, I thought I would start with a few images from our collections. Now we hold 7 so-called nationally significant collections. 5 of them are the biological ones that I'm talking about today. And they're held at 2 sites. They're held down at Lincoln, but also up in Auckland. So this is the invertebrate collection. And depending on how you want to count it, there's 1.5 million objects in this collection, about 7.5 million specimens within that. And they're mounted in pins and have extremely tiny labels with them. This is one of the things you'll hear me talking about or repeating, is that these are active collections. So there's up to about 20,000 specimens might get added to this collection in any year. So they're not something which is kind of complete. Down at Lincoln, we have the plant herbarium, the Allen herbarium, about 820,000 objects in this collection, dating back to Cook's first voyage in 1769. And we're adding to that collection around 5,000 to 10,000 specimens a year. And these just give you examples of how that material is preserved, because these collections are intended for a long-term reference as a viable resource for research, but also for communities to look at what's been collected through over the environment over time. This next collection is a little bit different. This is a culture collection up at Taranaki, and this is about 20,000 specimens of diseases from plants, bacterial, fungal cultures. And these are actually living organisms that are cultured, purified, takes a long time, and stored under liquid nitrogen. So they can be pulled out, thawed, and they're actually viable organisms. The culture collection, the rate of accession and adding to that is quite low compared to the others. It's only a few hundred at most in a year. We've got another fungal collection, again up at Taranaki, and this is the fungal herbarium, or fungarium as they call it now. And again, it's dried fungi collected. And just a few examples of some of the material they have. Again, I'm only showing a small subset of the type of material that's actually physically held within any of these collections. And so there's slides, there's material in ethanol for long-term preservation. And the other thing increasingly is digital footprint as well. So increasingly people are taking photos and adding that to the collection, so we can actually see these things in situ when they were collected. The last of the collections that were in the context of the talk today is the National Harakiki collection of New Zealand flax. And this started from a gathering of weaving cultivars and is maintained with the New Zealand Weavers Guild, and actually provides material, weaving material out to the communities, but also will distribute clones for iwi that actually want to take some of the material back and grow it for in their rohi. So I have to keep notes, otherwise I'll go off on tangents too. So my role with these collections over the years has been mixed. I've been working with these collections for over 25 years now. And throughout that time, I've had a strong focus on the data side, but also as a director and a manager of some of these collections. These are, as I said earlier, a long-term asset. And as a member of staff around those collections, we actually really feel a responsibility for keeping these as a taonga for the country, to actually preserve them for their use in the long term. And that extends to that digital footprint as well. How do we look after that digital data? One of the things I was doing a few years back was looking at the permits and the permissions that people are given when they actually go to collect material. And at the same time, I was working on the Nagoya Protocol, which is part of the Convention on Biological Diversity, about how do you get informed consent and how do you get benefit sharing back to the communities. And the contrast between the permits that we were seeing being issued and the Nagoya Protocol was just chalk and cheese. There was just, they're incomparable. And I happened to bump into Maui and was very grateful to be able to be involved in the working groups around the biocultural labels and the development, and then the test project that I'll show you some of the results of. So like all of the natural history collections, there's some kind of common characteristics which create some challenges from a collection perspective, and that's where I'm coming from today. So we collect, or we hold material from around the world. So therefore tools with a global context, a global reach were really important. And we're also continually adding material in, and there's updates to the data through scientific process or additional information being associated with it. So it provided us a few challenges in terms of how do we actually apply these as a natural history collection. We're very grateful to the 4 iwi, who we'll see on the next slide, and to my manager, Holden Haihaya, who will be talking this afternoon. They were really supportive in this work. One of the things we realised from a collection perspective is we wanted something which actually encompassed our willingness to collaborate with local communities, Indigenous communities at a collection level. And we wanted this to really sit as a permanent statement of our intent around our openness. If any community could find us through the local context hub and would have a way to engage with us to set up some of the next 2 project types that I'd see. So we actually, through this work and through the discussions with local context and the iwi, recognised that we needed 3 types of projects, and this is the first one of them. So this is an automated project within our information system. As soon as a new record hits the database, it's added into this record, into this project, and so this continues to grow. The feature here is that for each of those 5 collections that I was just talking about, there's a separate project in local context, but it holds every single specimen in the collection. And even if it's not digital, we would still consider that physical object to be part of that collection. The second type of project we recognised was the need for what we came up with the name area of interest projects. And we use that because these are defined by a territorial interest, and we're using the native lands layer, which I really commend as a resource. It's been extremely useful for us as a collection holding institute because it has that global scale in terms of a resource to look at Indigenous community territories across the globe. So it matches our holdings that we have with that global interest. The key thing we did here was once we sat down with and discussed with representatives from each of the iwi around the project we're creating. Holden will talk a bit about that this afternoon, I believe, from his Ngāti Maoru perspective, and he was instrumental in those initial discussions. But we took the idea of how we're going to organise this information back into those discussions to be tested as well. And so this is how we actually arrived at these 3 levels of projects. So this is defined by a spatial extent, and we go back to the native lands layer and update that periodically. So if anything changes around where that layer is drawn, it will get applied automatically across to these things. Again, any specimen that gets added digitally into our collection that has a valid georeference, so a coordinate of where it was collected, will get assigned to these projects based on that native lands application and that layer. And this differs from the first one in that these projects span the 5 collections. So the focus really is on the rohi of that particular iwi rather than the collection construct. The last type of project we recognise that may be needed is what we called a special interest project. And this is represented as the top at this of this slide. And that's where a particular iwi or hapu might say, hey, this is a particularly significant individual to us. We want you to put that into something separate so we can apply labels to that individually and to have potentially to have the different labels applied in that context. One of the things that's really important here is these last 2 we only establish in agreement with that community. So we will put the first one out there, which represents the collections. We've put up, it's got notices applied, which is all as an institute we can do. But the second two we only would create through a partnership with a local community. The other really important thing here is how we've structured this information. Any of our specimens can belong to as many of these projects as needs be. So there's no exclusivity on that. If there are different interests from different communities in the same specimen, we're able to cope with that and link the material accordingly. I'm not going to go into the technical details, much as I kind of like to, but this is enough. And really just to emphasize that there is a dynamic data flow going here, right? So our collection system hits the local context web service on a regular basis, and it does that to check for updates in the wording of the labels or new labels being applied or any other changes that apply to the projects that we've got registered. And so there's this continual talk backwards and forwards between us. We have various data outputs, as I'll show you in a minute. And one of the important things for us has been actually making sure we can process that thing through and to associate the labels that have been applied with the information in those data products. So that's as technical as I'm going to get. So you've already seen this. Corey's already stolen the thunder, so I can probably sit down now. One of the products we've had for a long time is how do we make this information accessible? And so we've had web portals ourselves. And this is the 5 collections again that I showed you at the beginning up as one of our data products. We've integrated the native, not only the local context labels and notices into this, but also the native land layers in here as well. So this shows you a search using the native lands spatial layer for Ngāti Maru, and the colours represent the different tribal interests according to the native lands layer. As you drill in onto some of these, you go down to an individual record and can actually get more details with each of these steps as you go in, until you eventually come to this page, or a page for an individual record. On the left-hand side of the screen is the metadata, or the provenance information, if you like, of that material. And this can be really long. So that could run for 2 or 3 screens at least. But thank you, Jeanette, wherever Jeanette's gone. She's left the room. She helped me a lot in how we actually laid some of this stuff out. So it's really important to me that I do acknowledge her contribution. Important to us was the equal prominence of the labels up on that right-hand side of the screen. And as Corrie said earlier, these act as links through to the local context hub. And we also show, as I'll show you in a sec, the details of the labels. What you can see here is 2 projects. So this specimen is in the Ngāti Maru project. But it's also in that Allen Herbarium collection project that I talked about first. So, and you can see that we've actually tried to order these so that we're getting the ones with labels actually always above those more the collection level things. If you drill into these, just as we've seen for Whakatōhea, you get the details of the labels. And this, if there were multi-languages, you should be able to pick the language. So these are 2 examples from Ngāti Maru, from Holden. Hopefully he will talk some more about that this afternoon. So just to skip back, I really want to contrast what we tried to do with the prominence of the labels here with the next challenge, the next piece of work I think we need to do. Whoops, sorry, one too many. This is that same record, but in a global aggregator called the Biodiversity Information Facility. So this is a world facility supported by global governments to bring that data together to make that information available equitably to inform decision making and use management and research. but the labels are not visible. Similarly with the Atlas of Living Australia, which this virtual herbarium is based on, it's the same record, but we currently have no visibility of those labels. Where am I going next? No, they're later. So, and I think that really gives a hint to kind of what next. So like I think that through this work and the collaborations we've had and partnerships, we've demonstrated that these can be applied, but there's still work. How do we get that information to travel through into some of these other contexts? There's need to work around standards and the mechanisms that ensure that information travels and doesn't lose its integrity as it goes, right? And we have to think about that from a collections perspective, thinking about that a data set might be archived in the long term. And so how do we, but then you've got this currency and there may be changes that come from the label side. So it's how do we cater for those kind of things? The other thing that I think is important as a community to realise is the volume and the variety of data that's going to come and how useful collection specimens can be in actually anchoring and linking the local context in that regard. So what we've been talking about today is largely this physical specimen object shown out to the left and the red record at the top. There's all this other information out there in the science realm that can be associated and linked through these specimens. Right? So it creates an opportunity for those labels to actually travel much more widely. Ooh. We'll see if this works. So one of the things I wanted to give as an impact, I take that again, do I? Right, yeah. So one of the things I wanted to do is give an impact around the volume of data that's coming, right? So there's a huge variety coming. This shows the Manaaki whenua collections over time, and the time scales shift a bit. So you got on the left when things were collected, whoops, there it goes, and when they suddenly become available digitally. And you see that there's been this massive lag. But what a lot of collections around the world now are doing is digitizing their holdings. And so the volume of material that's going to be available and the information through there is going to be massive. And then you've got that added variety that's coming. So from a collection perspective, these things have huge value for us because throughout that community, there's a desire to be good custodians, both physically and digitally, and to actually engage and work with people, the communities that have an interest in that material. Also, really to finish up, I actually would really like to commend working with the local context crew. That's been excellent. They're hugely supportive in what we've done. So again, thank you very much. And you missed me thanking you, Jeanette. You're out of the room. So thank you.
Yeah. No, Nathan's questions first. Questions in Nathan. Okay. Questions in Nathan. All right. Take the mic. Questions. Any questions? One out there. That's right. Just talk into it.
Test. No. I want to shout out the questions.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll do that.
Okay. Thanks.
So I need to wait for a mic. Can I just ask? Me? Okay. So a lot of the international dialogues at the moment are separating digital sequence information from genetic resources, and we're starting to navigate how we look at provenance in digital sequence information collections and what role the DC labels and notices can play. Do you have any thoughts on that at the moment? Because I know you're in the genetic resources space, but we're really developing a GSI at the moment, and I want to make sure we're ahead of the curve.
Okay, so the question was, where do the labels sit in the context of digital sequence information? Thank you.
Yeah.
Front and center.
Yeah.
there's no difference between the physical object and the derivative products coming off it. And when you start talking about digital sequence information, that's kind of terminology coming out of CBD and Nagoya. And if you look at those definitions, that kind of enshrines that idea in there. So I think it's essential. And I think it's an area that a lot of collections, that's why I think the specimens are important, because we can actually help join some of those dots up.
Any other questions? Yeah, the Rose over there. Rose.
My question's for Aaron as well. I was just wondering, when you're automatically applying the native land sequence over the records, right? What do you do in a case where land is contested? Do you have the ability to go in and manually add or override what native lands is giving you?
So in that context, we would, if we were partnering with a particular area who wanted us to use a different boundary, our system would allow us to do that. And essentially, we will follow the direction of that area or hapu. So, yeah, so we've chosen or agreed on the use of the native lands layout. It came as a recommendation from Maui, and it's been really useful.
Yeah, and so I'm just going to throw it back to Tanya. So she's the executive director there. We had this conversation, and largely it was that they were comfortable to work directly with communities about making changes, and so that you have to work with what you have, but then know that it's possible to make changes. And I'll just kind of hand it up to Tanya to comment on that.
I'm the executive director for Native Land Digital. So just to answer that question, for us it's really difficult when it comes to mapping Indigenous territories because we're working with open source materials, and just within the last year we've been working to centre and focus Indigenous voices on their opinions of territory. So that's why when we get to Native Land Digital, you'll see that it's a sort of a translucent layer of colour. That way the overlap can be compensated. So we don't want anyone to miss out on having their territory seen. And we try not to get involved with the arguments going around territories. As Indigenous peoples, we've been shifted from our territories, our original homelands quite often, and especially in Turtle Island and Canada, and South is Canada. So for us, it's really important that everyone's voice is seen and heard. So it's a lot of work for us. It's a very small Indigenous team. It's a constant work in progress. That's why we get that disclaimer at the front there that you have to acknowledge that you see that this work is happening.
Pathai, over there.
Tēnā tātou, aloha mai tākou, kia ora. I have 3 questions, but I'll stick to one for each of you. For Whakatōhea Mihi, it was in the space of when you mentioned both your strategic priorities and goals within your development as a trust board. But in the ethics of collections, you mentioned the training that you have developed. Is that still primarily within like the English medium, or are you looking more towards being able to develop your Māori and the intersect between science, for lack of a better word, in Te Pākehā, and our Indigenous understanding of Te Taiao and that kind of
Yes. I think it's an aspiration for all iwi to get to that point and level the regeneration of our language, our culture, and our heritage. Our identity is all intertwined into the work, I guess. But because a lot of these items, these whāonga sit outside of Aotearoa and institutions that we don't even, we're not even aware of. We need to build those relationships to find where they are, and Sexy helped us to to learn more about ourselves. Last weekend we released a book about an old Kapahaka group. Ngā Taonga Sound Vision had these recordings of this old haka group from the 1950s and 60s. And it just reminded us about, the sound, the language, how our people used to sound in those days. And so it's really changed our perspective on who we are as people. So, that's the kind of level that we're working at. Yeah.
Okay,
That's your question.
Yeah, so that does relate into my second question for Aaron. Has there been much research conducted with like non-English preferred countries or research institutions such as Japan, given that they do hold a lot of where the tech comes from, and like that redesign of what is generally quite limiting standards, protocols, language, essentially, both in like the codification of Mihi, digitization of tonga and data. So yeah, it's a very broad question, but have you done that, Mihi? And is there any, well, I assume there are opportunities, but kind of what does that look like and how we are entering that space?
I'll repeat yes. So there are information standards bodies who have been looking at the how this information, how the collection of place information moves around. And that's for an organisation open to anyone to participate in. I would say it's been predominantly Europe, North American, and a bit from Oceania in terms of that engagement, but it has increased. What you'll find is that most of the collections will be using their local language for recording material, but it does vary considerably. There's another part.
Sorry.
I can't remember.
Come on. One more question? No? Yes. Cool. No. All right. Thank you, Korua. I'm sure I had questions all the way through. It's one of those things that you get to at the end. But just want to also just thank you for all the work you've been doing to push that forward. And just going to hand the time over to Nathan. Kia ora. Oh, me. Sweet.
Yes.
Cool.
Thanks, man.
All right.
So firstly, I'd just like to start by acknowledging elders past, present and emerging, the lands that we're on today, but also the Barapa Nation back at home who I work for, as the General Manager of Barapa Land and Water. And I think all the other talks I've had today have kind of gone through a bit around the labels, why they're important, some of the background as to how they've been applied, how they've been used. We haven't got to the stage of actually putting a label on something yet. But I think the experience that we've had of how we're trying to get there and the value of it and to be able to communicate the values of what the labels are trying to achieve is what I'm going to try to go through today. I'm going to try to get to the end point of what we're of where I think we're going, but also trying to explain why I think for a traditional owner business or entity, the labels are something I'd say it's a business critical system and approach, kind of like you have your HR systems, like you have your safe work method systems or your OH&S systems, you have your finance systems, but labels are something which enables the clear and transparent use of cultural authority in the space and what we're doing and why we're doing it. And it's our reason for being. And the labels are a tool that's come along to support and enable that. That's kind of like the utes that we drive around in. They're a tool that we use to get from A to B. The labels are a tool that we use to demonstrate, and we should be using to demonstrate, cultural authority, rights and use within data, which is pretty much everything. But I wanted to start with a little bit of why it's important and when to start. I think for me, implementing the labels and implementing them as a business system, it's a lot easier to do it at the start of establishing businesses, corporations, entities. When they're beginning, labels become easy to apply. When you've got well-developed, mature entities, implementing any system, be it a new finance system, be it a labelling system, be it change in OH&S systems, is very costly, complicated, and time-consuming. It takes change, and it takes change processes to actually get people on board to step through that hoop and move to a new place. So I think this, how we actually communicate and support this as an approach that is something that's part of establishing communities, businesses, entities, others in that space that are looking to operate with cultural authorities really critical. And hopefully this stuff works. One of the reasons I think for this too, and I've got a number of slides just for dot points to hopefully ground me back to what I want to talk about, is that there's data underpins a lot of stuff that happens and a lot of decisions that are made and a lot of ways that stuff works in the world. And I think it's, and then we use data to create information, and information is used to create knowledge. And that's kind of the Western construct of how we do stuff and how governments work and how decisions are made and how funding goes out and priorities are done. But that's an approach that's put together from a way of not knowing. Knowledge is developed in this sense of a universe where things aren't known. This is the unknown approach. And what it forgets is that for communities, there's knowledge that's been developed since the beginning of time. And that may have started off with this data information knowledge approach. But over time, it's become a way of knowing. So there's knowns, which are described through law and LORE and other ways of knowing, being, and doing. And by having that the bottom approach to knowledge, we actually are starting to disconnect cultural knowledge in its importance and place within that space. And I think, Aaron spoke about the Nagoya Protocol, Convention of Biodiversity, and all those things, and they explicitly talk to this problem of how we see knowledge and how we see cultural knowledge and how we build it off data. That's what we're trying to overcome, and that's the reasons a lot of entities are about in the space. I'll go straight past that one. But one of the terms I think that we really need to think about and look in the space is cultural severance. I don't know if many people have had a thing about that, but there's some really good literature on it. And what it's about, in a really basic form using PowerPoint diagrams, hopefully, is taking cultural knowledge and we disconnect it from the knowledge base. It's about having cultural knowledge is something that's different and it's not connected over here. We actually need to make sure that cultural knowledge is back over here, and that's part of the labelling, and the power of the labelling is connecting the data, the authority, the control of the narrative back to place, back to community, and back to those who inherently hold the rights of the narrative. And that's what I think a lot of First Nations enterprises, corporations, businesses are about. That's their reason for being, which is why the labels become a business critical thing to use. So hopefully we get to that. But one of the big issues that is sitting out there, and it's one of the things that sits across not just First Nations communities, but it sits across everyone, is data literacy. And there is a really low level of data literacy understanding everywhere. What it is, how powerful it is, and how important it is. Because I think if one of the things we can get out of hopefully the summit and hopefully the next few days is that metadata is really, 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 really important. It is critical to actually doing stuff the right way. Connectivity of metadata and interoperability of metadata is really important for making sure that rights and labels travel with data, that people understand where those rights come from, and that it's actually all connected and it works. But how many people know about metadata? How many people care about metadata? Yeah, there's a few that care. And the number's growing, which is great. And some of us start to spend more time in how you actually get your head into metadata and how you make it work. So really critical. But by getting all that to work, that then enables cultural authority over the data, the information, the knowledge, and make sure that cultural knowledge is used the appropriate and right way in the right place at the right time by the right people. And that's how we need to be functioning as, First Nations, businesses, entities, corporations, others, which is where the labels become, again, business critical. So a few reflections on the labels. They can be hard and they can be easy. It can be really complicated to figure out how to actually understand what's in the labels, but they're also really elegant and simple in what they are, which a lot of knowledge and really well-developed knowledge is elegant and simple. And the labels are really elegant and simple, but they take a lot of time to understand the elegance and simplicity. People either love them or they hate them. People love detail or they love simplicity. There's not really a lot that's in between. And as a result, people either really think they're really, really important, like me, or they think, no, it's kind of just, it's a little gimmick that's on the side. But when you start to look at a lot of the international agreements and things that are in place, the labels actually are an incredibly powerful tool for First Nations to support a lot of colonising governments in doing the right thing in meeting their international obligations. So it's a support tool for our entities to actually enable governments to meet their obligations. And I think that's something that hasn't quite been caught on to yet, but I think we need to keep on pushing it. Why is it hard or easy? It takes time to get consensus. It takes lots of time to sit around and talk, understand. No, ensure that free, prior and informed consent is part of what you're doing. Groups often have not very good data capability because it's not something that's been central to actually mobilising rights or enabling people to do stuff. Hasn't been data capability. There's a lot of embedded processes in how you do stuff. People know how to do things. This works. This is how we protect our data, and this is the approach we use. But there's also, again, data literacy. Why is it loved or hated? Self-determination. Everyone's got the right to self-determination. Everyone drives cars, but everyone's got the right to pick which car they want to drive. And I think we need to make sure that labels are the vehicle, not the destination, not the journey. They're not the narrative, but they enable it. And just making sure that that's what it's about. There's also great mistrust in systems. People don't trust systems because systems have repeatedly failed. How do we make sure that these systems are owned, managed and centred in enabling people? And again, data literacy. People want to protect their ISIT. They want to make sure it's done. They demand it to happen. But we don't know. But not everyone knows how to do it effectively. Why is it valued or not? Everyone always thinks that their way is the best way, and it's always worked that way. So that's great. But at the same time, there's this assumption that it's working, and when you actually dig into stuff, it doesn't always work. So how do we actually use the labels to overcome those hurdles? We've always done it this way. There's a lot of approaches to protecting ISIT, protecting knowledge, making sure things are done, and that's one way. But then everyone has different wheels and tries to develop different cars. It doesn't always work. And again, the level of data literacy that's out there doesn't always enable people to grasp and go, wow, metadata is really important. And labels actually a really good, critical part of getting good metadata that enables ISIP to be protected. So a few reflections. Labels are incredibly powerful. They're an amazing concept, idea, and way of doing what needs to be done. Data literacy is a huge hurdle to overcome. How we build data literacy is going to be really critical, not just within communities, but across the globe, because if we don't get it right, we're leaving ourselves open to some significant exploitation. Organisational data literacy is really, really important to build, not just within ourselves, but also within government, to understand what it is, and the importance of getting things like metadata right to enable that cross communication, but also the carrying on of rights within data. It takes time, and there's lots of competing demands. There's lots of other things that distract people from the idea of data literate, getting data right. But if you don't get the data right, you're not going to get anything else right. So we've got to get the data right first before you do other things, which is where I think it's actually a really good time for for Barapa Land and Water at the moment, because it's starting to build the processes, starting to build the systems, and it's a good time to get data in because it allows you to build on it. And I want to just finish off with going through two different ways that we can implement the labels that I've kind of conceived. There's the hard way, and that's how I think it normally happens, and what I see everyone's trying to do, is that you have a well-established organisation, got good processes, got good governance, got everything in place, working really well. And then you want to go and implement a new system over the top and integrate a new system into it. Whether that's a finance system, whether it's an HR system, whether it's a label system, that is time-consuming, costly, and hard to do. It takes a lot of socialising, a lot of negotiation, other things, and it needs the labels to be really strong and precise. It needs to be hitting the nail on the head, and it needs to be using the right hammer to do it. But you're trying to do it in organisations that don't necessarily have a high level of data literacy, and you're trying to build capacity at the same time. And then the labels, what they actually do is they start to pull out where cultural authority sits within large entities that might have dispersed cultural authority. It might not be sitting in one spot, it might be in multiple parts of the organisation. And it starts to bring that out, and then people have to actually own that cultural authority within the entity. So you're not just implementing a new system, but you're understanding where authority sits, and where the obligation to protect rights actually sits within the business or the entity. So then people become accountable for the cultural authority that they have, and their obligations to protect rights when they mightn't have been before. So it becomes really complicated and hard. And I think there's a better way. There's an easier way. And that's where I think it's starting from the start. And it's starting at the beginning, and it's using it as a critical business system to actually develop a business and a structure and an organisation. Because then you can implement the labelling approach as just a template approach, but you develop and you build and you understand it over time in a learning by doing approach, and you implement it with the right way of learning and developing it, so it's applied, and it's actually not a set and forget. It's not to define everything and get it all precise at the start, but it's to apply it with the knowledge that you are going to change and you're going to adapt, and you're going to apply it as you learn and understand the scenarios, and you're going to enable it to actually define where cultural authority sits within and shifts within an entity over time. And I think that's a far easier way to do it, although finding entities at the start and setting up a system like that at the start also requires it to be ready to go at the start, like a HR system, like a finance system. What are the base building blocks that we use to support and enable entities based around First Nations rights and cultural authority to actually establish and create themselves? And that way, then the labels are about enabling rights, but they're also about building capacity and capability to understand what those rights are and how you use them, and how you're accountable and how you manage your obligations to actually put them in place. But yeah, I think that's it.
Any questions? They'll probably see.
Actually, question is just, if you have a very established organisation, is there any point in encouraging them to change?
Yeah, I think there's massive point in applying it, and there's a lot of strength and power and benefit in it. But I think it's, if you want the easy way, start at the start. If you haven't started at the start and you're already down the road, just be aware that it's going to take time. And it's not something, and although the labels are elegantly simple, they're not going to happen overnight. It's going to take years of actually socialising, understanding, developing, and getting it to that position of implementation. Even though it's not a complicated thing to do, but with businesses starting at the start, or entities starting at the start, I think it's a critical thing to actually think about whether you want to do it. Easier to do it at the start, bring people along for the journey, and bring them along a data literacy curve as you're growing, as opposed to trying to get 80 people on board, understanding it and doing it all. If you're starting with 2 and every person you bring on board comes up to speed, I think that's a far easier way to do it.
Oh.
Hey.
You just described the heuristic, right? You kind of figure it out on the way through.
Yep.
How, over time, because you've been doing it for a little while now.
Yep.
We're going to use it.
Yeah.
People use to tell us
No. It's for people on. Yeah, make it green. As long as it's green, it'll be all right.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Like I said, it's a heuristic, right? You kind of learn it as you go along.
Yep.
I guess there's a couple of questions here. The first one is, because it's so nascent at the start, how do you find a yield more down the track? What you did at the start still fits with the new knowledge that you gain through time, and how do you manage, I guess, moving, changing your original thought processes, and bring new ideas and new concepts into the realm too. So,
yeah, I think for me, what the labels are enabling is understanding a lot more, because there's trying to describe, a lot of entities have a fairly, I'm not sure about over here, but back home, got a fairly Western business governance structure in place that's trying to implement cultural authority through a different system, a different way of doing it. And then I think that what the labels do is actually change the conversation a bit in how that governance is actually overseen and structured. And I think what it's going to enable is that the labels are actually going to enable the labels to be governed appropriately in a circular way. Is that they're about enabling the authority to make sure that the things are done the right way, and the circular, they're reviewing themselves, but the governance but it's through the governance or the cultural authority of the entity that they get reviewed, and that's up to each group how they do that. But I think it's I think if that doesn't probably answer your question directly, but sort of,
Cool. Thank you. All right. Hold for a second. So we're about to go to lunch, and I was able to kind of squeeze a bit of time because it was actually a long lunch. So you don't have to get back till 1:30. There's food just out here. The bathrooms are out there too for those people that have been struggling sitting in this room. And I just also wanted to say thanks to all the speakers. I've got gifts for them. I will find them on the way out. And now you can clap for them all. Thank you. Thank you.